The Labour Party, under Sir Keir Starmer, is facing a defining moment. With a controversial decision to cut billions from the welfare bill, Starmer is being thrust into the same ideological crossfire that has claimed many of his predecessors. The political fallout is inevitable, and the outcry from within his own ranks could set the stage for a full-scale rebellion if the party doesn't pivot. If Labour wants to remain the voice of the working class, the vulnerable, and the disenfranchised, it cannot afford to backtrack on its commitment to social justice. The cuts to welfare, especially to the most vulnerable, are a betrayal of its very core principles. If Starmer fails to listen, not only will he alienate his own party, but he risks losing the public's trust as well. Let's be clear. Cutting welfare while touting the goal of protecting the most vulnerable is a paradox that should never have been entertained in the first place. Sir Keir Starmer's push to reduce the welfare bill, projected to soar to £70 billion by 2032, is not just a policy misstep, it's an ideological betrayal. Labour has long positioned itself as the party of the people, the protector of the sick, the disabled, and the working class. Yet, here we are, watching as billions are trimmed from the very system designed to shield the most vulnerable. There is no denying the growing pressure on the welfare system. No one is suggesting that reform isn't necessary. But the solution cannot lie in stripping essential support from the very people Labour was built to protect. Instead of cutting benefits for those who need them most, the government should be directing its efforts toward a fairer system that places the burden of adjustment on the wealthiest, not the most disadvantaged. The notion that the Labour Party, in any form, should ever mimic the Tory approach to austerity is, frankly, unconscionable. The comparisons to George Osborne are more than just politically dangerous. They are a stark signal that Labour is distancing itself from its foundational values. Moreover, the scale of the backlash from Labour's own MPs should serve as a clear warning to the leadership. Dozens of Labour backbenchers have expressed their outrage, with some even comparing the current government's approach to the draconian policies of the Tories. This is not a mere case of dissent, it is a profound crisis of trust within the party. MPs are terrified that these cuts will damage their credibility and, more importantly, erode the public's faith in Labour as a force for positive change. The backlash has been swift, furious, and entirely justified. How can Labour MPs go into their constituencies, look working-class families in the eye, and justify cutting the support that many rely on to survive? They can't, and they won't. Starmer may think he's appeasing the economically conservative factions of the country by pushing through these cuts, but it's a short-term gamble with long-term consequences. The idea that universal credit should be reformed to incentivize people to remain in the work search group while simultaneously slashing benefits for the most disabled or ill is a cruel contradiction. Are we to believe that those unable to work, due to chronic illness or severe disability, will somehow be better off in a system that provides them even less support? The logic is bankrupt, and the result is nothing short of devastating for some of the most marginalized people in society. There is also the political reality to consider. Starmer may be playing to a narrative that echoes the fiscal responsibility favored by the Conservative Party, but this strategy could backfire spectacularly. It was the Tories who, under austerity measures, relentlessly attacked welfare and public services, decimating the safety net for millions. Labour cannot afford to become the party that champions these same policies. To do so would mean surrendering its identity to a middle ground that is both unpopular and damaging. The public won't forgive Labour if it mirrors the cuts of a government it has spent years opposing. Voters expect more than just a vague promise of fairness when they are faced with the tangible pain of a reduced welfare state. The recent comments from MPs like Richard Bergen, calling for a wealth tax to fund social support rather than burdening the vulnerable, strike at the heart of the issue. Starmer should be championing such policies that make the wealthy pay their fair share, rather than retreating to austerity-light measures that punish the sick and the poor. There is no moral justification for reducing support for the disabled while billionaires continue to amass wealth at record levels. The argument is simple. If the government needs to balance the books, it should start by targeting the people who can afford to pay, not those who are struggling to survive. The Labour Party has always prided itself on its commitment to social justice. If it compromises on this, it will lose not just the backing of its MPs, but the very essence of what makes it Labour. No amount of economic reasoning can justify abandoning the principles of equality, fairness, and support for the vulnerable. If Starmer allows these cuts to proceed, he will find that his critics inside the party and across the political spectrum will have a new rallying cry: Labour is no longer the party of the people. Ultimately, the choice is clear. Starmer can either defend the cuts and face an ever-deepening revolt from within his own ranks, or he can choose to confront the wealthy and demand that they contribute more to the nation's welfare. If he doesn't make the right call, the damage to Labour's credibility will be irreversible. Starmer must act now, before this crisis becomes Labour's undoing.